Boundless Spirit, pushing the limits of talk radio with Charlene Springer.
Greetings, I'm Jazra Shamsura.
And I'm Samahat Sakuhai, and we are on Boundless Spirit Radio with Charlene Springer.
Welcome to Boundless Spirit Radio with Charlene Springer. And wow, we have an incredible show for you today. We've got the Earth Center here with us today, and they are Jazra and Samat. So it's going to be really interesting because I don't know the Earth Center, and I am excited to find out. I've heard bits and pieces about them, and of course did some research, but I'm so curious because for me this is like divination school, so I'm excited. So welcome, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the Earth Center really all about?
Okay. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to be on the air today and share a little bit about the Earth Center. Greeting all of your listeners, and just want to acknowledge, before I introduce the Earth Center, acknowledge the founder, acknowledge our master who paved the way for bringing this knowledge back to the West and allowing us to reconnect with it so that we can have, a channel, a connection to our roots. And it's important. Today is a big day for us because in 2009, on July 21st, he passed away. He made his transition to the world of the dead. And so today is a day where we observe his life, reflect on his life and the contributions that he made as a prophet of traditions, and, lament and recognize the sacrifices that he went through to reconnect us to our culture, to our ancestral culture. And so with that, the Earth Center is a nonprofit, non-governmental, cultural and educational organization, spiritual organization. It's multifaceted. There's many different layers and functionings within the organization. And we have our headquarters in the West is in Chicago, Illinois. And we have several branches throughout the United States, San Diego, California, Queens, New York, Charleston, West Virginia, Baltimore, Maryland. And then we're also going to be opening up in the next month or so in Canada, in Montreal, Canada. So those. And then additionally, we have 2 schools in the United Kingdom, Birmingham and London, as well as a school in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, West Africa, which is our headquarters on the continent, on the homeland. So we are international. The Earth Center is offering traditional Kemetic initiation coming out of the Nile and Niger Valley civilizations, and kind of reconnecting people with the practices of meditation, healing, and the Medu language, which is hieroglyphs, as the Greeks called it. It is a living language that we learn to read, write, and speak. And so all 3 of those classes are offered in an initiatic setting, as close to what we can offer being in the West in colonial territory. Of course, initiation looks different if you're living back on the continent and, in the bush and things like that. But as much as we can, we're trying to reconnect people with the principles, the values of indigenous culture, culture coming out of Africa, or what we call Merita. And so there's a lot. There's a lot. We have many services that we offer as well. I'll let Sama, continue and get into some of that.
Well, one of the things I wanted to find out is your prophet Naba. Tell me about him. Tell me, what was he like?
Well, I think I'll maybe take that question. As Jazra had just mentioned, really today we're experiencing some of the lamentations and some of the meditations of our reflections around his life, being as though this is the 9th anniversary of his transition. So really his work and what he represents us initiates and really just seekers trying to come back to the path is a thing of serious note to anyone who is on this path. So really to give you some history about him, say that he coming from the Gormanchi people, they're pretty much situated in Burkina Faso, but he's a high priest, the Kemetic high priest, a healer, the cultural activist and speaker, and really a worldwide authority on many different disciplines, from science to astronomy, psychology and metaphysics, sociology, and so on. And also really brought to us and reintroduced to us many of the various aspects of the initiation that was held in secret, that was tied to the pharaonic culture and pharaonic structure, all the way back to what people call today ancient Egypt. So his lineage, as we call Naba, is a lineage of priests and a bloodline and a name that's attributed to priests who are responsible for preserving spiritual and astronomical knowledge. And so Umtam in itself is a school that revolves around passing down that education and passing on that education to the folks in the world and the diaspora who wish to reconnect with the knowledge and the initiation that was preserved for over 2,000 years now. So there's a lot to really say about him and his life, and so much history that can come about from what he's taken on and the challenge he's taken on in bringing this knowledge that has been secreted away for so long back to the world. So that is just an introduction to who he is.
And I guess he was not he wasn't a renegade, like running away and stealing knowledge and bringing it to the West, forbidden knowledge, as they would say. You see that sometimes. But I actually listened to some of his work, and he made me pause. And for me, that's a big thing, that someone could make you like pause and you want to reflect on what they just said, because you feel it. It's a visceral feeling that you get, and I that's why I'm so curious about him, about his life, about what he brought that made the Earth Center happen internationally, etc.
Yeah, significant part. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to mention that, in terms of him definitely being, far from a renegade, he actually received the permission of the king of the Gumu Kingdom, where he comes from in Burkina at that time, who was reigning as king, and other priests and the temples there to bring this knowledge to colonial territories, to really with the mission of reconnecting people with their culture, because the devastation and destruction that we can see is happening just the world over. They could not sit back and continue to watch any longer, as it's been going for the past 2,000 or so years, where prior to that, our ancestors lived in harmony with nature, in harmony with one another, lived according to certain principles and values. We could trust each other. Human beings could trust each other, or humans could trust each other, live together cohesively. And now we see on a very basic level the kind of detrimental lifestyles that people are all engaging in, and the suffering that's coming out of it. And so he received the permission and was granted to that capacity to come here, and as a prophet, as a person with really the highest ranking in the priesthood of Kemet, bring his expertise, his knowledge, and try to assist and establish institution that can stand on its own and really assist people in re-guiding the direction that the human civilization is moving in, and really let people know that there's a bridge, between what we're experiencing here and returning back home to the principles and the culture that our ancestors lived, that sustained humanity for tens of thousands of years.
Mm. So what is Chem?
The Chem, to answer that question, I think the idea of Chem is really to be a practitioner, or one who takes on the responsibility of returning to their ancestral values. And they are really the culture of Chem, and you hear the name Kemet as tied to, the ancient land now people call, or the land now people call Egypt, is really a territory and represents more of a culture that the people who practice this particular way of approaching life and evolving and enlightening oneself, all of the people who live under that particular value or that culture will be considered Chem, and the places that they would live called Kemet. So really that culture and the people that live that culture was really worldwide. So most of the indigenous cultures you see around the world still have things that harken back and tie back to that original culture of humanity. And so these people, we kind of attribute that title or that name of Chem to people who practice the Kemetic culture.
Mm-hmm. So, and the school I've seen, your school's kind of broken up in like 3 segments. I would call it like a spiritual section, a healing section, and basically an educational section. So what would people get out of each of these sections, if you want to break that down for us?
Okay. Well, the healing aspect of the organization is under the umbrella of Ancestry Natural Healing. Ancestry is the part of the organization that offers services of working with healers to sit down and kind of have health assessments. We also do earth energy readings, or what some people may call divinations. We have many, many priests and healers that we work with back in Merida, or back in Africa. And so in addition, we have many herbs that we are able to get from the continent itself and offer to people for really just about any illness or ailment you can think of. And so there's those services that are offered under Ancestry Natural Healing, and which also connects to the education aspect, because within ETAM and the initiation that I mentioned that we offer, one of those classes is the healing, the traditional healing class, which we call Sunt in Medu. And
can you say that again? Sorry. Sunt. It's called what?
Sunt.
How do you spell that? Sorry.
It's okay. SOUNT.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just the English, phonetic translation. But in that course, you learn the different systems within the body and how to kind of assess the body, some of the remedies for different, ailments that we as human beings face, and kind of how to bring harmony and balance, to the body. And through that, one can become an apprentice to a healer by way of, studying under a healer and getting some, real practice, and then transforming eventually over time into a healer themselves, where the education can continue by returning back to Africa and studying under the healers and priests that are very well versed in the practice of healing over there. And Sama can continue with another aspect of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Also we have, outside of the Mtam and Ancestry, we also have another branch that is responsible for the publications, all of the magazines and DVDs and books and all forms of media, internet, all these web presence and so on is being handled under the branch we call the Firefly Production. Firefly Productions, you may even see, the magazines. Sometimes we have them available in different cultural stores and bookstores, as well as the online versions of the Firefly magazine and publications of that sort. So Firefly has really been responsible for a lot of the outreach and the way that we kind of touch the community and get our message out there. Makadu actually, or Master Naba, Prophet Naba, actually has a number of books, and actually two of them are published right now, the Philosophy Podium and the book on, the philosophical insights behind the Mtam, some of the foundational elements behind the philosophy of Mtam, as well as the a book of stories or initiatic stories we call Ta. It's very, very instructive and very informative in ways that you might not think, in relating different aspects of history, different ways of morals and stories of ethics and so on that were shared with initiates going back to Pharaonic times. So those are two books that are actually out now. And then there are a number of DVDs and CDs that we have of recordings of his programs, as well as his lectures and so on, as well as other younger initiates now under his tutelage who are also been lecturing and so on, taking up the baton of his work.
And then you have the spiritual side of it.
Yeah, well, I think go ahead.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, I think the spiritual aspect of it most of the time can be attributed to things that relate to me either reading, like the Ancestry. You may find there are readings in there where we do divinations and so on. Let me touch now and begin to explore and expose spiritual issues, as well as there's practices that we do on a regular basis that are, tied to our actual, what you would call spiritual activities, in order to keep ourselves aligned with the energies of the planet and so on, and to harmonize ourselves and keep our energy balanced so that, we can conduct ourselves as harmoniously as possible in our environment. So yeah, they are definitely, spiritual activity. We expose a good bit of that through the education of the Mtam classes. You can learn in Katibi in particular is one of the classes that offer meditation and movement, as Attorney Jana was explaining, and also teaches forms of spiritual activity, practices, movements, and so on that allow the human being to align themselves with, spiritual energies and so on, ancestors.
According to the philosophy of the school, I mean, why is it so important for humans to be back in balance?
Well, when you ask about the spiritual aspect of the organization, it's difficult to disconnect or see the spirituality is something separate from any other aspect or element, because that is one thing that I think for most of us who arrive at the Earth Center, it's our ancestors that guided us there. It wasn't by mistake, it wasn't by coincidence or accident or anything like that. It's really, the spirit within us, the ancestral spirit within us that's driving us, because there's a hunger to feed that aspect of who we are, which coming up in the West, we can see in colonial society, there's a real kind of disconnect, and existence is really kind of diminished to the material aspect of existence. If we can't see it, if we can't prove it, then it's not there. However, according to Mtam and the culture of our ancestors and Kemetic practice and civilization, and really, when you look at any indigenous practice, the immaterial elements of things are what we feed in order to sustain and maintain a harmony and balance in the material world, in the physical world. So it's really refreshing for people who maybe knew that somewhere within, and maybe just didn't have the exposure or the forum to reconnect or enhance that understanding. And the Earth Center, the Mtam education, the initiation really provides that, and that's what keeps us here and keeps us fighting, because it's that understanding, that recognition that is very crucial to the sustenance of our civilization, really.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Samad?
Yeah, I think to elaborate on the point of the importance of maintaining harmony is that you can see in the reality around us, the more disharmonious we find ourselves, the environment and with ourselves and between our interactions with human beings, animals, plants, and so on, with the planet itself, the more destructive you can see we become with ourselves and on the environment. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle. You fall out of balance within yourself, the environment then begins to almost become an aggressor to you, and you become an aggressor to it. And so, the relationship between yourself and the connection between yourself and the wider realities of existence begin to collapse in on themselves. So harmony really is necessary if we hope to be a participant and continue to be participants within this thing we call the world of the living or this existence. Then harmony, just like the plant, doesn't do anything different than it's supposed to do. It functions mostly as what it's supposed to do in communicating the energies that the planet expresses and so on, and functioning as it's supposed to. And if that time comes where it doesn't do that, then you find this, that particular plant may die off. The human being in a similar way to try to align themselves with that same kind of exchange of energy between the planet and the wider cosmos. And there are concepts for these that we can, elaborate on, but really to just, put it in a nutshell, the harmony that maintains everything that exists on the planet is so essential. And really right now, what Attorney Jazala was talking about, that desperation, that disintegration of society that we see in and of our so-called civilization is really as a result of human beings on the individual level falling out of balance or harmony with their knowledge and with the connection of themselves to the wider existence and harmony with the planet. So it's so essential, crucial to our existence.
Yeah, it's we see these are times that we definitely need it. It couldn't have come at a better time. Now, who are you trying to get in as initiates? Who comes? Like, first of all, what drew you to it?
The initiation is open to any anybody who is interested in reconnecting with their ancestral traditions. The Kemetic culture belongs to all of humanity, regardless of race, ethnicity, cultural background, you name it. It belongs to everybody. If we trace back our roots, close or far enough, we'll be able to see that. So it is open to anybody who's interested, and even if one is not interested in the initiation itself, there's many ways to just be involved or connect with whatever information and materials we have available and services we have available at the Earth Center. For myself, and I don't think my story is too unique. It's just the search that began at a relatively young age of trying to find something to connect my spirit with, and to feel settled in, and to feed that aspect of the self. And I think for me, I meddled in a lot of different religious practices and philosophical, things. And when I arrived, I came across the information of the Earth Center back in 2008. To me, it answered a lot of the unanswered questions that I had before, and it really, I felt at home. I felt at home with what the prophet had brought and what he was giving to us. Having the access to the code of human behavior, or what we call the original 77 commandments, having the original calendar that humans function by, just a lot of different spiritual tools, being able to do the spiritual purifications and, prayers to my ancestors, and all of these things, all drew me to come and to stay. So.
What about you, Samad?
I think for me, really what Attorney Beltrán was just saying, it's like everybody reaches a point somewhere in their time, in their searching, when the answers that they're getting from the familiar sources that you may be able to go to kind of just start losing their draw and start losing their ability to sustain or fulfill those questions that really pull at the soul. So for me, I've been raised in a particular religion. I came up in Islam. And so, many of the questions I had as a young boy just wasn't, clicking or making sense for me. So, that set me on a similar path of just seeking and searching and trying to read this and, look here and look there to explore and find something an answer that somewhat resonated with my being, And so, in maybe 05 or 06, I came across one of the Firefly Productions products, which was a magazine in a bookstore called the Firefly magazine, that kind of just put a little seed in my mind. Just the cover, just saw the cover. I don't think I bought it the first time I saw it, the first few times I saw it. And then slowly, I said, well, let me pick this up, because there were West African people on the cover, but then there was hieroglyphics, written all over the cover as well. And I'm saying, wow, what does West African people have to do with hieroglyphics? I didn't know they had anything to do with Egypt. So, that kind of curiosity, because I was reading everything I can get my hands on, led me to, take some trips to Egypt and so on and so forth. And long story short, eventually I actually read the magazine. And in reading it, I was like, wow, this is what I've been missing. I've been looking at it, and the whole time I had it in my bag for almost years with this magazine, and finally read it and said, whoa, this is what I've been missing, all these, connections and points of just resonance that kind of made sense for me, and the questions and experiences I had prior to that point in my life, So, yeah, that's what led me to kind of grab hold with both hands.
Wow. Yeah, I know it finds you. And I think I've seen where books have actually, you bought a book, you don't know why you bought the book, it's sitting there forever and ever, amen, and then one day you go, oh, I need this book, and it's exactly what you need at that time.
There's an
It's real.
interesting saying. There's an interesting saying. It says when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So we hear that,
Yes. Yes. So you both have the opportunity to meet with the master teacher, no?
I actually did not. He had made his move back to Africa, back to Merita, the year or sometime before I joined the Earth Center, and then made his transition about a year after. So I unfortunately didn't get a chance to meet him in person, though that ends up being a very kind of interesting aspect, because I find myself dedicating my life to his work, to his mission, to the center, and trying to assist in any way that I can to perpetuate this knowledge and this education to anybody who's interested and hungry for it. And that's really a testament to how influential he himself was as a human, and how profound his works were. And though I haven't gotten a chance to meet him, I have met a lot of his family with the opportunities I've had to return back to Merita and spend time with his family, in many different contexts. So that's been a real honor.
One of the things I heard is that this was a conscious ascension that he did. Well, you decide that I could do better not here, or, you see it with some of the Indian gurus, you see it with some of the Tibetan monks, that they make the decision that, okay, I am leaving, and I am, I can do more work from the other side, helping people.
Maybe one way I can address that is the fact that the prophet, he knew when he took on this mission, it was made clear that this is a very big responsibility, a very big destiny that he had to fulfill while he was here. And for those, who his elders and the like, he made it known to him that someone with this kind of magnitude of a destiny may not be here for a very long period of time. And for what they said, that rang true. So.
Any comments, Samad?
No, I think I would just echo what Zaza was saying about the work that he was aware of and destined to fulfill, coming from a line of where we consider maybe prophets coming from. Like, I'm not sure if you're aware of the name Naba. Like, also ties, me having an Islamic background, I know too that it ties to the name Nabi or Nabi. And Nabi is kind of like what we would call, who they call Muhammad. They call him Nabi Allah, which means, like the prophet of God. So Naba line, that Naba name has been tied to prophets, people from that line. And, they may have, Arab culture may have taken some pieces off of that to adapt to, their prophet or so on. But him having that responsibility or coming down with that responsibility, as Jaza was explaining, came with so much weight, so much, challenge that, it would shorten, if you will, the time that he could actually be walking in the world of the living. So,
So now, how I always hear whenever the Earth Center is mentioned, they always talk about the Dogon tribe. What does that have to do with anything?
The prophet Naba he was a Dogon, and the Nabas are Dogon, and Dogon are actually many different bloodlines, but they themselves, those bloodlines, we could say, every bloodline has a particular kind of gift or line of work that maybe the people of that bloodline commit themselves to or have been doing generation upon generation. And so, as Samad explained, the Nabas, were a priestly bloodline, and so they were the elites. The Dogon are generally the elites of the Pharaonic society in whatever kind of area of work or mastership that they have. And the Dogon, though at one time were in the Nile Valley, migrated to the west and did so to maintain the culture, to preserve the culture, because once outsiders started coming, invasions started taking place, that's where you see the secrecy aspect, because to protect and preserve the knowledge and the information that was sustaining humanity, on many different levels, to keep that pure, they had to migrate away from that area. And so we can see there's a lot of Dogon people now residing in the western parts of Africa and elsewhere.
Yeah, because the stories I've heard about the Dogon, they came. It's so funny. I had done this I guess kind of rites initiation with a Peruvian shaman, and one of the rites, it talks about star keepers, and when he did the rite on me, I immediately went to Africa, and I saw a tribe of people that had red and white on their heads, and I didn't know who they were. And it really wasn't until years later that I found out that this was the Dogon tribe, and they always talk about Sirius, and they knew about Sirius, or the stars, because they say that's where they came from, and they knew about them long before there were the strong enough telescopes to figure it out. So when I think of Dogon, I automatically think of star people, which is like a weird thing, but that's what I think of for them. So we look at the pharaonic, as you say, tradition, and when you see it, you go, well, pharaohs. You never think of it as dark Africans like you would, because the whole continent is Africa, but not like the northern Africa. You're thinking, he's saying that it's more that it actually came from lower Africa as opposed to the northern part, because the northern part was invaded. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, that's one of the major maybe misunderstandings due to our exposure to an education system and society that is, as we say, the history is written by the conqueror, the one who wins. Until the day that the lion has its historian, the victor or the story of victory will always be glorifying the hunter, or the one who managed to kill the one that was hunted. So really, we are victim. We live in the society of the hunter, who has now managed to sully the history of humanity at large and the continent in particular, and the cultures that arise from it, and the civilization that actually arise from it, and was responsible for emanating and disseminating civilization and culture across the world. With that corruption of exposure now, all we have is many points of conjecture, points of historical influence that usually come with some agenda to misinform and mislead those who might be seeking the path back to put the breadcrumbs back together in order to reconnect with some aspect of their original culture. So when you see now that the representation for what Egypt supposed to be, and furthermore, what even images of today of what Africa looks like and what Medita, its people and its culture and all these things. We always have a distorted image, even today, of what the world outside of, especially the Western world, looks like. We just have this image. So it's the same way propaganda works in relationship to Robin now. The people who should be credited with establishing that the original culture and preserving that culture now that is trying to re-emerge and reintroduce itself to the world at large. But yes, the people that came, like I was saying, I had the problem or the confusion when I saw the magazine cover with hieroglyphics and black people. And, black people that look like, my family, there's black people. And that was confusing. So, to see now that really at the time and at the point of invasion, where cultures from maybe peoples from the northern parts of the world began to descend or, come into Kemet, then the Pharaoh decides now to say, hey, look, we need to preserve this knowledge and keep certain aspects of it secret because of the fact that we've been invaded and these people will come and take, like they've been doing for centuries prior to. So at one point, the Pharaoh decided to start sending us out sending the Dogon and sending various tribes out down into and to put the Sahara between themselves and the invaders. So they move west, they move south, they move in different directions. And so this is who now has been preserving the knowledge. So when you look now at these places, just like let's say you come from some place where you hadn't had exposure to America, you might think the people sitting in America now that you run into in New York City is representative of the Americans. But really, you see, really now, who really are the Americans? You don't even see them. They're in the shadows on reservations and this and that, some of the worst conditions, because they're the ones been pushed out, and economically and so on, deprived and socially sidelined and marginalized and so on. So you don't hear about them, but that's really the people who are, here among others. So, you don't want to confuse, we tend to maybe confuse that image, and I was a victim to that as well, as putting the image on Egypt and Kemet as a whole different color or different, quote unquote race of people representative of, who was actually there and, prior to them, that point of mixing and invasion and so on.
Because I remember years ago, someone was saying that it was actually a Nubian pharaoh that they had to call back to put things back in order. And that was the only mention I ever heard of someone coming from Lower Africa.
Yeah, you have upper and lower. They say lower is actually the part that's going towards the Mediterranean. We call it lower. And that's really...
Okay.
And then upper is the part where, maybe above the what you would call the equator. That whole part is called upper, and then the other side we call lower. So,
thanks for correcting the clarification, yes.
So they minus the third, or you see, even geography and our sense of orientation, even in space and time has all been turned on its head. So, this is coming back now to this, the exposure and to this knowledge that we haven't and that has been reintroduced. It's kind of reorienting the human being now to where things actually fit. And the more you explore that, the more you find your place in it and see how harmonious the puzzle starts coming together.
Yeah. Because, there are just so many things, because you learn one thing and you show up and you're like, but wait a minute, I thought this was, a particular way, and it's not. So, we'd say we're awakening, our eyes are opening, and we're unlearning. And I think this is what your master teacher Nabnaba saw. He could bring that, and he could share that information, and I think that's just so incredible.
Yeah, and one of the beauties of that also is a lot of times what we have access to in studying, about Kemetic civilization is from the standpoint of maybe academics or like anthropologists, ethnologists, and things like this. And we pick up these different books and we want to grab onto something, but a lot of times those are perspectives coming from the outside about from people who weren't actually interested in the application of the culture or application of it as the truth or the foundation of human civilization, but rather just on an academic level or an entertainment aspect. And so with the Earth Center and what the Prophet offered, you're getting a clearly a very insider perspective coming from one within the culture itself who had his teachers, who had his teachers, who had his teachers, and Utam itself that's over 90,000 years old, and the knowledge has been preserved and orally transmitted as it was from generation to generation. For those now that are really interested in kind of redirecting their life back to their ancestral culture. And so for this, you get a very different kind of perspective and therefore understanding that develops within the self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, incredible. So now, where to with all this? I mean, you're opening more centers all over the world. There, as you said, there are a couple in London or in England. So is there going to be a bigger expansion? What's going to happen with the Earth Center? And do you have a call for where more people are asking for, we need this, we need more of this, we need this in our city? Is there a call for that?
Yes, definitely more. I mean, really, the cry for knowledge. I think maybe everyone who has been in the field of exploring and the search and the seekers and meeting and touching one another, touching people who are in that walk, can feel the momentum building of people trying to kind of awaken, just the lights are starting to come on, slow but sure, and I think that along with that movement and that momentum beginning to pick up, there is a larger and larger outcry and appeal for, the knowledge that has been offered by even the Earth Center to those who can, finally make enough, I guess, round up enough of the members who are willing to put the effort forward to kind of bring someone here to teach and so on and get everything going. But it's growing. The outreach is definitely growing more and more. We have places, people in the Caribbean, people I know in different places that are interested in having a school there, having the initiation there. So, with time, we just progress and see, how we can get everything out. Baltimore, in fact, is a new location, fairly new location, and last ones to come to, be opened up since the Earth Center has been, put in centers around since 1998 or so, opening centers in different countries and internationally. So we are actually the ninth school to open. So and the last one, so far. So we're a new school, and I happen to be, one of the ones trying to wave my flag and say, hey, come here, because initially I traveled to New York to actually get my initiation. Me and my wife.
Oh, wow.
Because we drove. So, the seekers who wanted will, try to find it whichever way they can. So fortunately now, with the help of ancestors and so on, and those, who made the sacrifice by teachers and so on, came and, managed to start a school here. So it's just building like a grassroots, people who show the interest, people who really have the drive to really learn and notice will begin to, put the call out and do the work to bring a school to the area and a temple to the area.
Beautiful, beautiful. We like to hear that it's growing. So, with all this now, again, you have there's certain deeper teachings that you have with this, and you mentioned it a little bit, and I'd like to go into some of it because there are also more myths. It's not only the myth of what was really ancient Egypt, but any other myths you can talk about today.
I guess if there are so many, if there's any one that pops to mind, that you want to.
Well, what was the biggest shock for you then when you started this process? That, when you went in and they said this and you were like, what? Are you sure?
There's the education is so rich. Every class that you come to, there's a revelation, honestly, in the first level. Now, the initiation is tiered, so there's a first level of the initiation, which we call Per Ankh. And so those 3 classes, they take about a year and a half to complete. And so when you first arrive, there's so much that we're exposed to in kind of reconfiguring our paradigm and reshifting the perspective of how we view the world. And a lot of it, is overlaps in the classes themselves. And I would say one big aspect, that we gain in the initiation is recognizing that how emotional we as human beings have been functioning. Our emotions play such a big part in defining who we are and how we see the world. And it really, the prophet in his genius made that a very important focal point, because if we can't get past that, it's very difficult for us to function as thinking and logical human beings who are actually progressing with a solid foundation. And so, that saying, emotions don't think, it's kind of like constantly playing back in the mind. And we really start to see the reactionary and the impulsiveness by which we function with each other in almost every circumstance. And so this is a very big, a big thing for me, and still is, because we come up in a culture here, or a lack of culture here, that's really founded on emotion and illogic. And so unlearning that, as you said, that takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. And so it's been a long, 9 years of just that aspect, and that's just one, aspect of what the initiation has exposed. And like that, there's so many, different things. And within the emotions, not thinking, the prophet brought us the divine code of human behavior, reconnected us with the divine code of human behavior, which is 77 principles or 77 commandments that are territories that we just will not or should not cross. A code of behavior that human beings have to live by, that really guide us and have always guided us in knowing what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. And this code, which we do, you can purchase at the Earth Center. It's a poster that we have with the 77 divine principles for $5. And it's the best $5 you can spend, because it has very simplistic things like thou shalt not be impatient, thou shalt not get angry, thou shalt not speak scornfully. Really things that we do so often, and really, paint our history that we're writing for ourselves. And so to accompany the containment of our emotions, we have this guide, this code of human behavior that's very, very fundamental to being a Ken and a person walking on the ancestral path. So, these are a couple of things that we've been exposed to.
I always thought the emotions were your connection to, the divine.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things we find. Um, remember I was saying when the society is shaped, or the one that's conquering you, oftentimes they're the ones that shape perception and shape your worldview based on history, based on all of the disciplines that they expose us to. So
Yeah.
the human being being a product. This is one thing that blew my mind, even though it's simple and it's common sense really. The human being a product of their exposure. In other words, the human being does not invent. So therefore, whatever it is that he or she is exposed to becomes what shapes their perception, their understanding of reality in the world. So now, if that's a fundamental principle of a human being, whatever you expose them to now becomes the thing that they view, the lens that they view the world through. So now, if you can manage to put something like emotion inside of that way of perceiving the world, you understand that most of the things that we do that we regret, we've done when we were emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the things we do is like, man, I wasn't thinking. Oh man, if I was thinking, I would have never done that.
Mm-hmm. So it's out of balance emotions.
So you find like the emotions, but then we have that played up. So all our movies, all our entertainment, all our heroes, all the exposure we have, most of the things we connect with, and we find ourselves finding the empathy and the enthusiasm to go looking after and really championing for and cheering for is usually things that have us emotional, really highly emotional. But really in that emotional state, you're the most vulnerable also. So now we're like trying to reconfigure, why would somebody say emotions don't think? Why would we get that, teaching us maybe if there's something in that, like you're saying, there's an imbalance in the way the emotions may be being used, so that now we put that ahead of the thinking process. Really, the thing that will guide now whatever emotions may be compelling us or may be propelling us forward to do. Use your thoughts to direct and to, put that that propulsion or that, that force to good service rather than regretting things that you just did on the impulse of the emotion alone. This kind of like the the little understanding behind why now it would be so important for the society that manipulates human beings into all the things that they want to manipulate us into, which is how you can see us in the conditions we are now, so vulnerable and so taken advantage of and so misled and so destructive in many ways. Action reaction. They hit us, we got to hit them harder. That reduces you to a kind of animalistic way of being. So it's like, how can you access the divine in that same space with using that same tool when it's so vulnerable to corruption? So maybe there's something there we need to balance, or maybe, shift. So, along the points of one of those things that blew my mind as well was understanding the goal of the human being. The goal of the human being, as we understand or taught in the first level is to be like the God. And he's like, well, coming from my background, Islam and so on, my goal was to just get to heaven, And I think many religions, you just want to get to heaven, just get to that place and you drink, milk and honey and this and that, live in eternity, forever and avoid, the hell. But then I said, wow, what kind of goal is that to be divine, to be considered, like a divine being? That completely shifted my way of looking at my approach to my life and existence. Because now I have to understand, well, what does it take to be like a divine being? What does it take for me to evolve to that state? To move beyond just saying, well, now I'm just dead and I'm going to go to this place and live with milk and honey for, however long. How much can you take of milk and honey? You see? It makes that point kind of like, okay, that don't make sense. So what else, and then on the flip side, I didn't ask to be, in this existence, and now you're going to burn me in hell if I didn't do what you asked me to do, never makes sense. Now I say, well, the goal of the human being is divine, and to become divine. And this is where those 77, ordinances and the code of human behavior comes from, to say, hey, these are the things you need to do to approach or to navigate in your world, and the things that you don't do in order to stay in line with those things that can help you along that toward that goal. That's how we define good and evil as well. What is good and what's evil. So it really, it was a game changer, that particular point.
For you, yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that just connecting to the earth, like actually being physically in it, as opposed to just being on streets and concrete jungle, do you think that that was a key part of helping with your growth, your spiritual growth?
No, I was asking if it was for me. I can answer though. You were saying connecting back to the earth by way of, I wasn't sure what you meant by reconnecting to the earth.
Well, what happens is, when you live in cities, people don't even touch the ground, basically. They're on pavement, they're in a car, they're in their house. So they never really touch the earth. And I know you do a program with the herbs and food. So sometimes, I know I've been on a farm and taken my shoes off, and it was the most incredible experience. So, do you believe that that's a key part of what makes this work, that they're connecting back to the earth, hence the Earth Center?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I think that the Earth Center is really a concept that maybe ties to something a little bit more spiritual, and in the sense of there's concepts behind what that is and history behind what the Earth Center is. As a concept in itself, but the fact of literally walking on the earth and reconnecting with the earth is definitely a facet that is crucial to harmonizing with the earth. So the more denatured we make our environments, the more sterile, the more devoid of natural elements. Of course, the more disconnected we find ourselves, and the more likely we are in that disconnection to be ignorant of, and to let's say ignore, to dismiss our need to reconnect with it and to preserve it. Because if you're living in this thing and you don't really have a way of touching nature and seeing the role that nature plays to your well-being, why should you care? Why should you care? And so I think more and more people that live, and you find that even the personalities that live in cities and, with all the traffic and the noise and so on, they even take on a kind of, dehumanized and disharmonious way of being with each other and the planet. So you could see it actually having almost an immediate implication on the way a human being in that environment responds. So, yes, the earth, connect to the earth is definitely one of the things we do when we go on pilgrimage, is spend a lot of time in the traditional areas where we live, and the traditional elders and families, so on, live right in the close to the earth. The earth is dirt ground, all earth as far as you can see. And so, they connect. That's constant. They don't break the connection as much as we do. We live most of the time in the, isolated kind of boxes, if you will, that cut us off from that. You're right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dazra, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with what Sama is saying. We are, human beings are part of nature, and in the lifestyle that we live, especially urban people, we really lose that connection, and what we perceive to be reality is something very disconnected from nature. And you can see that in the youth, even when you ask them questions like, where does milk come from, or where do eggs come from? There's a real perception, and children are honest, and they really think some of those things just come from the store, and so, and that's, it's sad that that's what we've come to. Because as Samat was explaining, we every year take an annual pilgrimage back to Merida, and we're able to really live and immerse ourselves with the people and, the culture, indigenous culture, and be in the bush, be in nature. And though we spend time, in urban areas as well, because we do a lot of traveling around and, gain a lot of exposure to different aspects of our traditions and our culture, spending time in nature is a big part of it. And by the way, the pilgrimage is open, to the public. You don't have to be an initiate to join us on these travels. And so with that, we're eating outside, we're cooking outside, we're, spending time with one another outside. You wake up in the morning and it's like really, you can sleep outside in many instances. And if you sleep inside, that's really the only time that you're indoors, because you're doing everything outside in nature and just really facing the elements. And, as challenging as it can be at times, that's the human reality. And it's the earth and the energies of the earth that sustain us. So being able to immerse ourselves in nature and try to fit harmoniously within it is a big part of reconnecting with our ancestral traditions as we've been disconnected from.
Yes, I hear that. So now, how can people get more information on you? Like, how can they find Earth Centers in their neighborhoods, et cetera?
Okay, well, we have a website, it's called theearthcenter.org, so www.theearthcenter.org, O-R-G. And there you can go to, the contacts to see, locations closest to you. We have, like Jata was explaining, we have one in Baltimore, Charleston, and in New York, as well as San Diego, and Chicago. Chicago is the headquarters here in the U.S. so far, with others opening soon in Canada, as Jata was explaining. And for worldwide places like London and Birmingham, as well as Washington. So, between those locations, we have, available now, and then some may be opening as people begin to call and, make that call and say, we ready.
Very good, very good. So, when is your next retreat to Africa?
We do have a pilgrimage that will be taking place in December of this year. All the details and specificities are still being worked out. But if one is interested, they can contact, the headquarters location. The phone number of the Chicago school is 773-359-4160. Again, that's 773-359-4160, and gain, more information and ask, questions about the pilgrimage and the finances and, what have you. So that's a starting point. And in addition, the website offers the products that we produce, all the publications, and things that we offer can be purchased on the website as well, or you can look on the website, see what we have, and then call the Chicago location and place your order as well.
How long is usually how long is the pilgrimage?
The pilgrimage is to the public. We generally open it up for 3 weeks, the first 3 weeks. And then if somebody is an initiate, they have the option of staying for 2 months. And then there's also, if somebody has a need to travel, because as I said, we offer healing services and divination services. And so from those, if somebody needs attention given to their health or to their, spiritual life, there's opportunities to come outside of pilgrimage as well, to get that attention and to work closely with healers and priests to bring harmony back into one's life.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you guys for being on with us today. This is the first part of the Woo Hour. The first part of the show. We get to have you on the Woo Hour next. Thanks again, Earth Center, and website, www.theearthcenter.org, for more information on the pilgrimage to I say it wrong, Merita. You can get more information there, and then just, find out if there's one in your city and stop by and check it out. It might be something that might interest you. And, we'll see you next time. You've been listening to Boundless Spirit Radio with Charlene Springer. Take care.
Boundless Spirit goes off the rails. Next up in our members-only segment, the Woo Woo Hour. Whether it's happening on the planet, off the planet, or inside the planet, host Charlene Springer, expert guests, and you dare to go there in the Woo Woo Hour.